A photo of Michael Collins emerges from the depths of space, stirring long-held questions. Did the first moon landing really happen? Since Joe Rogan raised numerous inconsistencies in NASA's story, this question has haunted the public. And now, adding fuel to the fire, Michael Collins, the third Apollo astronaut alongside Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, has just revealed shocking truths about that historic mission. Secrets that NASA skillfully concealed for many years, and coincidentally, these revelations align with our long-standing suspicions. So, what exactly did Michael disclose? And why are we only learning these secrets now, over 5 decades later? Let's find out. The moon's first human visitors. The moon has always amazed people, and many have tried to explore its rough surface, but their attempts failed, making it quite believable that the famous Apollo moon landing was a fake, not to mention the fact that the moon is literally a very difficult place for anything to survive. Even though space exploration fans understand why people might question the Apollo landing with the many questionable observations in the moon landing video NASA released, it's odd to think it would be easier to fake it than actually send people to the moon. Many conspiracy theories about the exploration mission existed for many years, even though there's very little proof to support them. But there's something that has gotten everyone's attention and drawn our attention to more detail in the moon landing video. Recently, Michael Collins, the third astronaut on the Apollo mission, shared some shocking information about the mission. He talked about encounters and specific details that NASA has never revealed before. Joe Rogan, the popular host of the Joe Rogan Experience, who is very interested in space, has recently talked about some strange things related to the Apollo mission. Rogan believes the mission itself was real, but pointed out several weird incidents that happened on the moon, which most people don't know about. Before we reveal more about this, how about we give you some important background information on the mysterious living satellite that is the moon. Humanity has been interested in the moon's mystery for centuries. Even without advanced tools, early observers noted how the moon influenced the tides and calendars. Ancient myths even suggested the moon could impact health and wellness. With advancements in technology, humanity began sending unmanned probes to the moon. The Soviet Union launched several missions, and the United States had its Ranger and Surveyor programs. These missions provided useful information about the moon's environment and surface. Each discovery increased our eagerness to send humans to the moon. During the Cold War, the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union intensified this desire. Both nations wanted to showcase their technological advancements and achieve national prestige. In 1961, the United States initiated the ambitious Apollo program to land a man on the moon and return him safely by the end of the decade. Before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth, the Apollo program involved multiple phases, including suborbital and orbital flights, practicing spacecraft rendezvous and docking, simulating lunar orbits and landings, and conducting spacewalks. Every aspect was thoroughly tested and rehearsed. Then the D-Day came. On July 16, 1969, the world watched as the Apollo mission launched, and on July 20th of the same year, the lunar module, named Eagle, gently touched down on the moon. The 3 astronauts, who were Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, and the world-renowned Neil Armstrong, successfully reached lunar orbit. Armstrong and Aldrin prepared to explore the moon while Collins remained in the command module, orbiting above. At exactly 2:56 a.m. GMT, Neil Armstrong made history by becoming the first person to walk on the moon. Shortly after, Buzz Aldrin joined him. Together, they spent about 2 hours collecting about 382 kilograms of moon rocks and soil and conducting scientific experiments. After finishing their tasks, they planted the American flag, showing the success of their mission. Then they returned to the main spacecraft where Michael Collins was waiting, and they started their journey back to Earth. Finally, on July 24, 1969, they landed safely in the Pacific Ocean, completing their incredible mission. Their return was celebrated with great joy. These brave astronauts achieved something that many thought was impossible. Now, here's where things get interesting. These samples gave scientists important information about the moon's geology, what it's made of, and its history. The samples also helped confirm the idea that the moon was created from a massive collision between a Mars-sized object and Earth billions of years ago. Scientists also discovered that the moon's surface is mostly made of basalt, a type of volcanic rock. The moon samples revealed another important rock called anorthosite, which is light-colored and contains a lot of aluminum and calcium. This showed that the moon went through a process in its early days where different layers formed. By studying these moon rocks, scientists determined that they are about 4.5 billion years old. This gave them important information about how the moon and our solar system were formed. The Apollo missions did many experiments and made several observations on the moon. The astronauts set up instruments called seismometers to record moonquakes and study the moon's seismic activity. These measurements help scientists learn about the moon's inner structure and how its mass is spread out. Not only that, but the Apollo missions also placed retroreflectors on the moon. These devices reflect laser beams sent from Earth, allowing scientists to measure the distance between the Earth and the moon very accurately. This helps them track the moon's orbit and its small changes over time. Another mind-blowing accomplishment of the Apollo missions was setting up scientific experiments and instruments on the moon. For example, during the Apollo 14 mission, astronauts installed the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package. This package included tools to measure things like solar wind, moonquakes, and heat flow from the moon's surface. The astronauts saw many signs of past volcanic activity on the moon. They observed channels where lava had once flowed, long trenches called rills, and cone-shaped hills formed by volcanoes. They also found tiny beads of volcanic glass, which they called orange soil. These glass beads proved that there had been explosive volcanic eruptions on the moon a long time ago. The Apollo program was important for more than just scientific discoveries. It showed what humans can achieve in outer space with determination, advanced technology, and working together internationally. The missions inspired many future scientists, engineers, and explorers, and set the stage for more space exploration. But one part that didn't sit well with everyone was that some parts of the Apollo 11 mission were not shared with the public at the time. Now, years later, Michael Collins decided to reveal these hidden details. It doesn't sit well with us, and it makes us wonder why. But before we proceed with that, what even is the moon and where did it come from? The moon's origin is one big question that has led to many debates among scientists, and as you'd expect, they've come up with different ideas to explain this mystery, where the moon is. From one idea called the capture theory, suggests that the moon was a wandering object in space that got caught by Earth's gravity. But this theory has problems because it's very unlikely such an event would happen. Another idea, the accretion theory, suggests that the moon and Earth formed together from dust clouds in the early solar system. Usually, when planets and moons form this way, they have similar characteristics. But the moon is different from Earth in some key ways, like not having an iron core or the same tilt in its rotation. One hypothesis, known as the fission hypothesis, proposed that in the early days of Earth, our planet was spinning so quickly that a chunk of it flew off and formed the moon. However, this theory was later proven wrong. Scientists discovered that moon rocks are much older than the rocks found in Earth's ocean floors. This finding made it clear that the moon couldn't have come from the area of the Pacific Ocean. Today, the most accepted idea is the giant impact theory. This theory says that about 4.5 billion years ago, a huge object the size of Mars hit the early Earth, creating a spinning disk of vaporized material. The impact was so powerful that it created a lot of debris, which eventually came together to form the moon. Although this is only a theory and hasn't been proven, it is currently the best explanation we have. Now let's take a quick look at what happened during the famous Apollo 11 mission. When the astronauts landed on the moon, they faced serious challenges. Two parts of the automatic control system failed, and there were problems with the radio communication. This meant Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin had to manage the landing themselves. Even with these issues, their skills allowed the Eagle landing module to safely land on the moon. People watching on TV had no idea about these difficulties. On paper, the moon landing seemed flawless, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were very excited after their successful landing. They were so eager to explore that they decided to skip their planned rest before stepping onto the moon. NASA made some secret changes to the schedule to make it look like everything went perfectly. It took years for the public to learn about these hidden details, and NASA faced criticism for trying to make the mission appear perfect. As time passed after the moon landing, more information was leaked, and you won't believe what it was. Some people claimed that Armstrong and Aldrin saw a large spacecraft on the moon, but these radio messages were never shared with the public. Some who worked at NASA in 1969 said they had heard these communications themselves. Despite this, Armstrong and Aldrin always denied seeing anything unusual or encountering aliens on the moon, so it's no surprise many space fans think the moon landing never happened. Dr. Ken Johnston Sr., who was an important contributor to this context, worked as a civilian astronaut consultant pilot with NASA during the Apollo missions. He also worked with the Grumman Corporation, which built the lunar module used by Armstrong and Aldrin. Johnston witnessed some extraordinary events while at NASA, and after he retired, he felt compelled to share what he saw. His claims turned out to be quite surprising. Johnston said he had access to many photos and data showing strange anomalies and unusual structures on the moon. He claimed that these pictures showed clear signs of things made by humans on the moon's surface. Some, even though these pictures prove that aliens were on the moon or often visited it to do things there. Johnston also said he saw how NASA deliberately kept these pictures and information secret. They changed the photos they showed to the public to hide these strange things. Johnston bravely saved some of the original photos and negatives that were going to be destroyed, so people in the future could see them. But Johnston didn't stop at just talking about the weird structures. There's more to it. He also talked about secret space programs and agreements between the U.S. government and aliens. One of these agreements, called the Edwards Agreement for the Preservation of Humanity, is said to have happened on February 20th, 1954. It's said that President Dwight Eisenhower made this deal with a group of aliens called the Greys. Some say that Eisenhower let the Greys take people and examine them, as long as they brought them back safely with no memory of what happened. People from all over the world have reported being taken by small gray aliens on their spaceships. These experiences have left many people very upset and struggling to find help. Some reports say that the Greys don't always do what they promised in the agreement, or that some people can remember what happened, even though their memories were supposed to be erased. According to these stories, Eisenhower helped aliens by sharing advanced technology with them and letting two of their ambassadors, called Krill and J. Rod, stay on Earth. Krill is described as a being that looks like a reptile coming from a group of stars called the Dragon constellation. On the other hand, J. Rod is said to be an alien known as a Gray, originating from a star system named Zeta Reticuli. After leaving NASA, Dr. Ken Johnston Sr. became very interested in parascience and pre-astronautics. His personal experiences and the things he learned made him want to study these subjects more. Like many others, he found some interesting connections between writings from ancient Sumeria, the beginnings of Egyptian civilization, and stories about aliens. Johnston started to think that all these different pieces of evidence might be part of a bigger story, suggesting that ancient civilizations or aliens might have lived on the moon. One thing that added to this idea was the supposed crash of a UFO in Roswell in 1947. Many people said they saw a spaceship and met a gray alien. Johnston used his connections and opportunities to look into this. His research made him believe that the Roswell incident was the start of the U.S. government talking to the Greys. This eventually led to a strange treaty in 1954. Some say that President Eisenhower met with the Greys during a secret visit to Edwards Air Force Base. Officially, it said he was there for emergency dental treatment while on vacation in Palm Springs, California, but some internal reports, supposedly from NASA and the U.S. military, say that the soldiers who met the Greys had serious psychological problems afterward. These aliens seem to have a very bad effect on people, causing things like depression and anxiety, and even leading to some people taking their own lives tragically. Johnston isn't the only one who has spoken about aliens. William Cooper, a former Navy intelligence officer, has spoken out about aliens. He talks about two different kinds: the friendly Nordics and the tricky Greys. Cooper says that the Nordics helped make a deal between humans and the Greys. This deal supposedly let the Greys take people for medical reasons, but these ideas are controversial, and neither NASA nor the US government has said anything official about them. When people try to check or talk about these claims, they usually just say they're not true. Joe Rogan is very interested in Michael Collins, who doesn't get talked about as much as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Rogan thinks Collins did a lot to make the Apollo 11 mission work. He says Collins did more than just his technical job. Collins was the one who talked to the crew on the moon and to mission control on Earth. He made sure pictures and observations got back to Earth quickly, which helped us learn more about the moon. Collins had a special job that no one else on the mission had. He knew that if something went wrong, he would have to bring everyone back to Earth alone. Because of him, Mission Control got the information they needed, and the Apollo 11 mission was a success. Collins also did a trans-Earth injection. This was when they used the spaceship's engines to leave the moon's orbit and start heading back to Earth. Collins had to be very precise to do this right. In a lot of ways, Collins was like the backbone of the whole mission. Even though he was by himself and doing more of a behind-the-scenes job, Collins showed what teamwork and working together were all about. While his crewmates were on the moon, Collins spent time alone in the command module orbiting the moon. During his time in lunar orbit, Michael Collins spent 21 hours around the moon. For 48 minutes of each orbit, he couldn't talk to anyone on Earth or on the moon's surface because radio signals couldn't reach him. He was all alone, far away from his friends on the moon and from mission control. This gave him a chance to make some interesting discoveries that changed how he thought about the moon. The rocks and dirt samples Collins found had some strange things about them that were different from what we see on Earth. On our planet, the newest rocks are usually on top and the older ones are buried deeper, but on the moon, it's the opposite. The dirt on the surface is older than the rocks underneath, and the rocks on top are older than the ones below them. This is different from what we know about how rocks usually move around on Earth. The moon also has other things that don't fit with what we know about planets. On Earth, heavier things are usually closer to the middle and lighter things are on the surface, but on the moon, it's the other way around. Another interesting thing about the moon is all the craters from asteroids hitting it over billions of years. You might think the rocks around these craters would be different ages, but they're actually not. They seem to be about the same age, which is strange because it means the moon's surface has been pretty much the same for a long time. The dust on the moon is also weird. If it was just from rocks getting hit over time, it would be like the rocks around it, but the dust is different, which adds to the mystery of the moon. Besides, even though the moon doesn't have its own magnetic field, some of the rocks on the moon are magnetized. This is different from Earth, where the magnetic field helps make rocks magnetic. That isn't the end of our curiosity about the moon. What about how old the moon is? While scientists think Earth is about 4.6 billion years old, some moon rocks are even older. Some of them are from the very beginning of the solar system, which means they're very old. The fact that moon rocks are older than Earth's rocks tells us that the moon formed and has a history that's different from Earth's. One more interesting thing about the moon is that it has a ton of certain metals that are rare on Earth, like titanium, chromium, and zirconium. The fact that these metals are on the moon in big amounts is interesting because they're strong and don't get damaged easily. They're good for making things strong, so it makes us wonder if the surface of the moon might be covered by a strong metal shell. This idea could help explain why moon craters, no matter how big they are all about the same depth. Scientists wanted to check if the moon might be hollow, so they did some experiments during the Apollo missions. When the lunar lander from Apollo 12 crashed into the moon on purpose, it made some strange seismic readings. It sounded like the moon was ringing like a bell for more than an hour. Then, during Apollo 13, they made an even bigger thing crash into the moon. This time, the ringing lasted for more than 3 hours and went about 20 miles deep. These long-lasting sounds and how they changed at different depths make some scientists think that the inside of the moon might not be as dense and might have big, empty spaces. The density of the moon itself is also hard to understand. Even though the moon is about 1/4 the size of Earth, it has only about 1% of Earth's density. If the moon were a hollow shell, it would explain why it is so much less dense. Besides its physical traits, the way the moon moves in space adds more mysteries. The moon has a nearly perfectly circular orbit, which is rare. This special orbit, along with the moon's size and how far it is from Earth, makes it look almost the same size as the sun during solar eclipses. This precise alignment is an amazing coincidence that scientists don't fully understand yet. Considering all these odd features and coincidences about the moon, it's not surprising that some people, including Michael Collins, think the moon might be more than just a natural satellite. The idea that the moon could be an alien spacecraft placed near Earth is definitely worth thinking about, and we're pretty sure it'll be in our minds until we have clarified answers. What's your opinion on the possibility of NASA making more shocking discoveries on the moon besides rocks and metals? That brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. If you loved the content and learned something new, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to our channel to keep up with our next updates and uploads.